Good morning, everyone. This is the City and Police Union contract labor negotiations. I propose to start the meeting the same way we start every meeting, which is introductions. My name is Courtney Washburn. I'm the Chief of Staff for the City of Boise.
Jamie Sullivan, City Attorney.
Biff Jones, Chief Administrative Officer, the Department of Finance Administration.
David Jones, Union.
Danny Carter, Union.
AJ Veens, Union.
Kristen Holt, HR.
Justin Erickson, Department of Finance and Administration, City of Boise.
Ron Weiniger, Chief of Police.
I'm Adam Collier, the city's outside legal counsel.
I'm just going to ask tech support to see if they can turn Adam up. I can hear you, Adam, but not particularly well.
Okay.
And with that, I believe we're going to get started with the union.
Yeah, I don't see a folder for the 20th though, so I don't know where you want me to drop. Unless I'm mistaken. All righty.
Do you want me to go ahead and do that? Okay, I'll do it.
It does sound fun. All right, the union is going to discuss potentially changing the way we look at the pay scale. We dropped in a proposal. The top of it shows the current pay scale, which has 3 pay scales, the PO pay scale, which we still have members on, the NPO pay scale, and the lateral pay scale. I think some of the original goal was to simplify the pay scale. We also wanted to compress it. I think we're abandoning the compression side of that because of the cost to it. Biff mentioned that it costs an additional $2 million to compress. So what we're proposing is 1 pay scale, which is listed there on the proposed pay scale. The only thing is what we're looking to do is migrate the laterals into 1 pay scale and the POs into 1 pay scale. To do this, there's a difference in the PO3 rate and the PO1 rate for the NPO3, NPO1, and LPO3 and LPO0. So what we would advocate is an increase to those hourly rates, and those are the current hourly rates on that pay scale, with the red being highlighted, of an increase of $3.07 to what would have been the NPO3 previous, and the NPO1 of $4.79. Based on the Questica information Biff provided us, we estimate that to be 40 members in the PO3 region and 38 members in the PO1 region. And so that was the simplest way for us to get to 1 pay scale, is to try to put everybody on a single pay scale to simplify it, which will help in recruiting. It'll help in dealing with headaches after people come to work here. And it is not compressed. It's just we're trying to slide it into 1. So on the original pay scale, the PO pay scale, we only have members that are in PO10 or higher. So it wouldn't affect any members from that pay scale because they're already at those same pay rates as that center column of NPO. The laterals, once again, the only ones it affects are the PO3s and the LPOs. So it is a little bit in alignment with what the city has proposed in the past, as far as trying to bring up the newer officers' pay to assist with the incline in costs of living in the area. So it would be a jump for, the non-probationary police officers, a little bit of a substantial jump on the pay to get everybody in the same pay grade. And so we're prepared to, the sergeants, we would just leave it the way it is. And then as we work through what a pay increase would look like, we'll just add the percentages to those. So we're open for discussion regarding that pay scale. And I know Biff will have to run numbers, obviously, to calculate these kinds of things, but as conceptually, I think that it benefits both the department and the union to have a simplified pay scale.
Do you have an estimate of the financial impact?
Yeah, we were told earlier, I think you were part of that Biff would run all those numbers.
So you don't, no. And that's okay.
I don't have access, well, I'm sorry, we don't have access to Questica. So that's why you guys are running numbers correct.
My point was you were coming with a proposal that was less than what you believed it to be before based on Biff's numbers. My only question is, do you have an estimate, a rough estimate, which it sounds like no, which is okay. I'm just asking if you had an estimate of the impact.
Well, I think you're well aware that the city originally designed this, that Biff would be kind of a resource that everybody would use. And that he would kind of be his team would kind of be the number crunchers so that we get it accurately. So to your question, no, by design and agreement between the city and the CLA.
An observation and a question from my seat. So I see that, you're isolating one of the variables of the negotiation, which is just the pay structure. So I'm recognizing, looking at where pay rates are today, that's what the current pay structure is at the top. And so really this is a structure proposal,
Correct.
And so any negotiated percent increase would be from this starting point.
Correct. That's what we're advocating.
Yep.
But I figured one of the goals was to create a more amenable pay structure. And so I figure if we start here, before we start talking about cost of living raises, like that'll give us at least a foundation to start on instead of calculating all these variables and then trying to figure out how we would crosswalk people. So the way we envision it is if you're a lateral LPO 5 and you've been here a year, basically that would be the same as a NPO 5 who've been here a year. And so basically wherever you would start on that schedule, it would just continue just like if you're a new person, whether you're a lateral or not. And that's pretty much how we've done the LPO scale. It just pushes it into one. And the first column, the original PO schedule, will attrition in another 5 to 10 years, depending on how many people stay here. But as far as the dollar salary rate, it doesn't affect it, although this would obviously attrition it off.
Can I ask where the proposed numbers came from for the increase? What are those based on?
Those are based on our current. So this is just our current pay scale. This is just our current numbers.
I'm sorry, I mean the proposed pay scale increase. So the LPO 3 at 307 and the LPO rate at 479. I'm just curious where those numbers came from.
So basically what we did was we just said, how do we convert everybody onto one pay scale? And the least amount of effect with 78 members would be moving LPO 3s into NPO 3s. The LPO 3s currently make $37.20. And the current NPO 3s make $34.13. So obviously our members wouldn't appreciate taking a $3 pay less. So we figured we'd have to increase the NPOs. So it's the difference between NPO 3 and LPO 3.
Thank you, that's helpful.
And then the same for NPO 1 to LPO.
And Denny, are you proposing this becomes effective like retroactively or upon ratification, or when would the change be?
I mean, we would recommend that this be part of the contract going forward. So once this contract goes into effect, that this would be it. Now, we do propose a cost of living coming up today to discuss a cost of living increase on top of these numbers. But what we really would like to do is resolve this 3 pay scale issue. So just historically, there's at least 3 groups of hires that were told information that was incorrect or inconsistent with the contract as far as where they would start, what their pay would be, when they would receive additional payments, pay increases, et cetera. And so I think by just simplifying this, it would be very easy for the administration. It would be very easy for people who are interested in lateraling here, for them to get on the internet and see what a pay scale is, to understand what their costs or their expenses would be versus, their income would be versus their costs as far as recruitment and doing that. So we're really just trying to simplify the pay scale.
And I think we're all in agreement that that is good for everyone to have a simplified pay scale. And I'm not the mathematician in the room, but if you take the 40 members with a $3.07 increase and times that by 2,080 hours a year, you come up with 255,000 and change. And then if you take the 38 members increasing by 479, it comes to about 378. So a total of about $634,000 impact, roughly. I'll let Biff be the one who runs numbers, but that's just my quick figuring. You would have a little over $500,000 impact by doing this.
Yeah, that sounds
Per
about
year.
correct, Chief. And so we're not necessarily looking for approval on this at this moment. Obviously, numbers are going to have to be crunched. But if conceptually you think that is amenable, then maybe we can start talking about cost of living, and then Biff can crunch all the numbers and come back with really what it's going to cost the city for what we're proposing.
And from my vantage point, I think that's good to see the whole landscape of what you're proposing. And then, great rough math there, Chief. I think it'll be good for us to look at the whole landscape and then help reflect back to you the cost of the different parts.
Yeah, we anticipated that's how it would go. So with that, I will upload. So with that, we popped in a brief statement of proposal for pay. A year 1 cost of living increase of 7.75, a year 2 cost of living of 6.25, post certification pay of 0.33 for an intermediate, 0.33 for an advanced, 0.33 for a master compounding, and 0.75 for the supervisor pay.
It might just be me, but I don't have
You
the
don't- okay.
document.
Well, let's try this again. All right.
Just to see if I'm on the right one. Is this?
Well, that's probably why.
Is this the 7.75 and 6.25? Is that the one?
Will you move it, AJ? I gotta relog in.
I can do it, AJ, real quick.
You can do it?
Yeah.
We gave it to you verbal.
Wait, what? What are you talking about?
Okay, it should now be moved.
All right, let's see if I can get the log back in
What does
here.
it say? Is it under city proposals?
No, it's in the union.
All right, there we go. So we wanted to incentivize training and education. I know the city had changed the requirements and then provided some information related to, for example, Chief Brooks, who didn't have a college degree, ends up with a master's degree and becomes a chief of police and now a deputy chief of police. So we feel like we need to incentivize training and education. And to do that, we're going to have a post-certificate pay. Otherwise, people are not going to be interested in going back to school, not furthering your education. And I think that that's important for the citizens to have the best officers they can. So with that, the training and education part, without a college degree, it requires 6 years to get an intermediate post-certificate with 2 years of college and some training. So the way those work, and I think the chief probably understands it the best from the city side, is that it's a combination of training and education and years of experience. So for example, the master certificate cannot be obtained until 15 years or greater of service as a law enforcement officer with a degree and substantial training. And so not everybody would be eligible for the certificates based on where they're at. So a 3-year officer without a college degree would not be able to attain an intermediate certificate until they either were at 6 years or had finished some college education. So those variables, and I think it's going to be a little challenging on Biff's side to figure all that out, but that is definitely something that we feel is important to continue the education of our officers and members, especially with lowering the standards to start with, which is not a bad idea. It's just we want to keep people moving forward and growing. Then lastly, we want to talk about how we're going to bring laterals in. We feel like it's important to have a consistent issue. We've dealt with this a couple of times at the table so far. We haven't really come to terms. I don't know how much of that was the previous chief. Originally, we asked for halftime credit up to a certain level. We will continue to that. Basically, any lateral up to 14 years would get halftime credit. So they would start at level 7. If they were a 10-year, they would start at level 5, et cetera. And we would remove the discretionary and qualitative analysis on basic experience on officers and just have a fixed rate. So when people lateral here, they'll know where they're going to start. And so our second proposal was related to how Meridian does it, which I think we'd be okay with, but I think this is a simpler formula. And ultimately, we just take their years of experience and cut them in half and say, this is where you're going to start. And hopefully if we're hiring good people, that experience comes through and the reason that we hired them. So if we hired somebody from a more experienced place versus a less experienced place, my guess is they're going to finish better on the testing. They're going to be more qualified. They're going to be hired. So we're looking to remove that. We have some trepidation related to the qualitative analysis of what makes that experience. And I think the best example that we have right now, in my opinion, is Officer Armando Arroyo, who came from a small town in Idaho, with 3 years experience. He's an excellent officer. But when you look at him on paper, we didn't give him credit for his skills and ability. And so I think that this is the simplest way. It will alleviate headaches that we currently have and have been dealing with for the last few years.
So just to clarify, under the proposal, if somebody worked at, pick one, LAPD for 10 years, they would get 5 years credit. If they worked at Wendell PD for 5 years, they'd get 2.5 years credit. So there's no differentiation between experience and no discretion available in those matters.
So our concern is that discretion has been abused. And I think the best example is we had a chief who brought in some people from Portland with 10 years of experience and gave him 10 years of credit, and then turned around and gave a 12-year Portland experience guy three years of credit. And so how do you draw those lines? Because where the Deputy Chief Brooks worked, 110-man department, they have a lot of experience, but that's different than LAPD. And LAPD, you don't do as much as a patrol officer because detectives handle pretty much everything. Whereas in a smaller agency or an agency Boise side, a lot of times you do a lot more. Sometimes detectives don't get involved. I know for a fact that LAPD, you go on a major crime and all you do is fill out a face sheet, get the basic information, detectives show up and conduct the investigation. Sometimes at smaller organizations, you do the crime scene investigation, you do the interviews, you do everything. And that is a greater experience. So I think just like when we hire a brand new person, we're taking a little bit of a gamble based on the interview process of what this person's going to turn out to be based on the training experience. So I don't know what the right answer is, and maybe we could have a discussion about what's a better way to qualitatively and analyze those. And it's not that we're trying to take or asking to take away all discretion from the chief, but I think it makes it simpler. It's more transparent. And when I'm sitting in Texas and I'm looking at coming to Boise, Idaho, I can see right on the website, this is my experience. This is where I would start my pay. And I have a good understanding versus I have to go through the process and then the chief's going to decide where I start. So on the recruitment side, I think it causes us some headaches. And so Meridian system is a little bit different, but it's also declared, and there's some slight discretion in there, and we wouldn't be opposed to going back to that. And we can pull that back up. That was previously denied during other negotiations, but I think we need to resolve this issue.
Do you happen to recall when you proposed the Meridian model?
No, we'll have to go back.
I can go back too. I just didn't know if you knew.
I don't remember exactly, Chief Washburn. It was probably one of the latter. I would say my guess is September. In September, we're doing proposals. So, I mean, I understand the.
I personally am not opposed to having some structure in place, so I get that. I would just also like to preserve some level of discretion if things need to be adjusted somewhat one way or the other.
And I think the Meridian model is a good model, and we can pull that back up and perhaps on a breakout session, you guys could look at that and we could figure out if that's amenable. The other thing is we want to be competitive with Meridian and local agencies so that isn't a factor that sways a lateral from going here or over there, that it's off the table because at least it's comparable.
I just don't remember. Is Meridian like a guaranteed minimum with the discretion at a max? Like, can we get the predictability from a minimum and then leave the discretion to go beyond that based on some factor?
I believe Meridian's was if you have 3 years of experience, they will bring you in at a certain level between 0 and 3. And then if you had like 3 to 5, they could bring you in at 5 or under. And then if you had more than 8, they could bring you about 5 or higher. We'll have to double check. There was some discretion in there. And I think we would be amenable to that proposal because it's also competitive with Meridian. It does have some discretion, but it has some caps, and it requires less qualitative analysis conducted by the administration to make those determinations.
Hey, Denny, can I ask 2 questions?
Sure.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding. First, on the proposal for the compounding post-certification pay. Oh, I see. You added the 0.75 for supervisor certification. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, that's for the supervisor certificate.
Okay. Thanks.
With the Idaho Post, if you're already a supervisor, you can't obtain your master certificate. So it's a little weird how the IDAPA, the regulation rules are. And so if you, for example, if we had a 20-year sergeant who became a sergeant at year 10, he was ineligible to apply for a master's post certificate because he didn't have 15 years of service. And because he's a supervisor, he can no longer apply for it. So we wanted to ensure some continuing education incentives for the supervisors also.
Okay. And then second question, so your wage proposal, the 7.75 and the 6.25, I think the last proposal we got from you was 6.25 and 6.25. So what's the justification for going back up to 7.75 in year 1?
Well, with the compression, all these numbers change. So with the compression costing an additional $2 million, and that was a factor in the city's decision for their proposal. Since this isn't related to compression, it's going to alleviate some of those costs. And so what we would ask is that we come up with some calculation costs related to those, or a city determination on those numbers, because it doesn't include the $2 million cost that compression cost.
Okay. Okay, I don't have any other questions. Does anyone else?
Yeah, I do. I just want to make sure I understand the potential flight paths for police officers in your proposal for the certification pay. So if if an individual were to receive their intermediate certification, they would get 0.33%. If then they go on to advance, it would compound, they'd get 0.66. They opt to get a supervisor cert rather than a master. So then it's going to be the sum of the 0.66 and the 0.75.
The way we would write it once, if we got down to the nitty gritty on it, I think would be if you're a supervisor, you're eligible for the supervisor cert, and that would take off the table the other certs.
Okay, so it's cumulative up through master.
Correct.
But then the supervisor cert replaces.
Correct.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if we want to do a little bit of a breakout session. We could look for the Meridian lateral proposal and show you. I can text Adam and tell him where it's at. And then you guys can review that, and we can figure out where we're at.
That would be great. Does anyone have any additional questions before we break? All right. How long would we like to break for?
I think that's really up to Biff.
I'd propose we start with 30 minutes and go from there.
All right. So we should be back by 10 o'clock.
Okay, thank you. And Adam, I will text you where that proposal was or what that looks like, so you guys can discuss it in session.
Thank you. Does my team want to send me a link for connecting?
Hey, Adam, I'll give you a Teams call once we're in the room.
Okay.
All right, folks, we're back from a break, and I think we'll start off with Adam.
Okay, so we spent some time, Biff spent some time costing your proposal that you gave us, and I think we were going to have Biff explain that to you. We like the pay structure that you gave us, and we can talk about the cost of that. And I think for the lateral proposal you gave us, we like that as well with one tweak, which I think the chief can explain. But why don't we start with having Biff kind of just walk through the costing?
And Adam, do you want to speak at all to the certification pay component, or do you want me to run through my numbers and then come back to that?
Why don't you run through your numbers first and then we'll talk about that.
Okay, great. So Chiefs, back of the napkin math turned out to be pretty good. So for the shift in the structure, so just talking about the enhancement to pay for PO1 and PO3 ranks that you had reflected to us, when you look at just the pay rates, the number that Chief had offered previously was about $630,000. And once you factor in fringes and overtime, that number is closer to $750,000. And then when you look at the base pay adjustment of 7.25%, that adds an additional close to $1.2 million on top.
That was 7.75% Biff rather than 7.25.
I'm sorry. The proposed base rate change was 7.75. Is that what you said?
Yes. I think you just said it was 7.25. I thought it was 7.75.
Thank you. That means our numbers are slightly low, but even so, that gives you a rough number. Because Justin and I, as we were running the numbers, we had in our head 7.25.
So the $750,000, that's for the 2-year contract, or is that for year one of the 2-year
That's
contract?
just year one.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yep. So year two of that piece, the year two component is about 840,000. So think of that money going to that group of employees. And then in year two, so total impact year one, and once again, let me do some tweaking on the formulas.
Okay.
So if it's 775, and Justin, if you'll double check my math over there too. Okay, so as best as I can in those few moments, that increases the cost an additional almost $250,000. So all in, the cost of those two components, the structure change and the 775 in fiscal year 23, is just south of $2.3 million. And then in fiscal year 24, I'm projecting it's just south of $2.6 million.
Okay, thank you. And how many members did you come up with from Questic, or did you just use the numbers that we kind of gave you?
Yep. So we ran with your numbers, but Justin and I did double check before we started crunching those numbers. You came up with 78. When we looked at the population file, it was about 73, and so we figured it was really, really close.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So Biff, as far as the comparison of what the proposal the union gave us this morning versus what the last proposal was they gave us last time, are those similar?
Yeah, so total cost, and once again, I'll let Adam speak back to the certification pay component, but already the magnitude of financial impact is rivaling your last proposal.
Okay, so roughly around the same.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's where we're struggling with, because we don't have that much money to put on the table. And so we're trying to figure out, we can come back with a counter proposal and guess where you would prefer to have the money. Is it towards the laterals? Is it towards everyone in base pay? Is it certification pay? Where you want it to go, or we can have you tell us what are your priorities. So, and you can either give us another proposal, or you can tell us what your priorities are, and we'll try to come back with a counter proposal that meets our financial limits, but prioritizes what's most important to you.
So I think from our perspective, the pay scale and the certification incentives are a priority. And I think we would welcome a counter proposal with those included, and then see where we're at on the cost of living impact that you think the city can swing. Obviously, numbers are numbers, and we're willing to negotiate some of those. But I think as far as a structure goes, we would like to leave that structure in place. And then we can maybe play with the accounting side of that going forward.
Okay.
And I don't know if that answers your question, Adam.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's helpful for us. I from our standpoint, the certification pay, we had talked during our caucus about, instead of certification pay, opening up the city tuition reimbursement program to members of the police bargaining unit. And I think from our standpoint, we would like to see the police officers further their education and get degrees, and by opening up the city's tuition reimbursement program to them, that would allow for that. And I think we were less interested in the certification pay.
So I appreciate that. I think the post-certificate pay betters the organization and the members individually more than just a tuition reimbursement program, because the tuition reimbursement program only will help on their formal education side, where the post required training hours will help on the experience and specific police related skills, additional training. So I think for us, the post certificate pays incentivize both a formalized education as well as a job specific training and education, and would bring up both. So, I mean, I think that we would be more amenable to dealing with the overall costs versus removal of the post certificate pays and for tuition reimbursement, because we feel like that's only a one-sided incentive, where it's only incentivizing the formalized education. And with the post, you will get accelerated by having a formalized education. Having a bachelor's degree accelerates it to a certain level. Having a master's degree accelerates it even faster, but also requires law enforcement specific training, post-certified training. And so it incentivizes both sides. And we feel that that would be the best carrot to make our members better. So we would prefer some changes on the overall compensation package versus removal of post certificates.
Okay, well, thanks for the explanation. I know Biff and Justin did run the numbers on the additional cost of your certification pay. And so I think that's another something else that's going to have to, we're basically trading money in different funds and trying to figure out what will work for the overall city budget.
And I think that we're trying to approach it from a reasonable perspective. Obviously, we don't know the city's bottom line, but we're willing to give up. We understand that there is a finite resource, and so we're willing to massage this however we need to get the most prioritized things for us. So I think that if the city has a better idea of how to squeeze in a cost of living raise, giving these other factors, we would welcome that proposal, and then we can continue to massage the numbers from there.
Can I ask a question regarding the post certification? If we go down that road, do you have a sense of the number of folks who are in each category? Is that something we need to go back and research? Because obviously we have a certain number of folks in the basic, the intermediate, and the advanced certificate ranges.
Well, based on the Questica information previously provided by Biff, which I don't understand 100%, we estimate that there's approximately 37 people eligible for the intermediate, 102 people eligible for the advanced, and 105 people eligible for the master. I don't know everybody's education rate, so we went on the lowest common denominator, assuming that everybody had a college degree. So for example, in the intermediate rate, if you have a college degree at 2 years, you can get your intermediate post. So we went off the numbers based on that, assuming that everybody did, knowing that that's the higher number. But I'm sure Biff can use the Questica system to be the most accurate. And then on the supervisor side, there's 29 supervisors. Not all of them would be eligible, but we just use 29 sergeants.
And did you run any numbers on what that translated to as far as a cost?
We're going to rely on Biff and his team.
Gotcha.
Okay, and then I think we wanted to have a quick conversation about the lateral pay. And Chief, you want to speak to what the tweak that we would like to propose there?
Sure. So in general, I think we can be supportive of the proposal that you made as far as lateral pay and crediting halftime for service outside this agency when they come. We also want to have the ability to have that discretionary offer above that in certain circumstances. So in other words, if we are looking for a lateral officer with a particular skill set, then we would like to maintain the ability to offer something more than what the structure says. So we would be good with the structure as proposed, with the caveat of adding that at the chief's discretion, he or she could add up to 5 years of service to that. So in other words, if an officer comes in with 10 years of experience, or let's say 15 years of experience, they would get credit for 7.5 years here, and that would be the pay scale that they drop into. The chief could then, if somebody has the particular skill set that we're needing or looking for in the department, and if we can afford it in the budget, we would be able to offer them up to an additional 5 years of service, dropping them into a higher pay scale at that rate, if that makes sense.
I think that that would be amenable to us. I am curious to see how that would look related to, for example, let's say they capped out at 7, the 7 range, and you wanted to add them to 5 years based on the skill set. Where would that put them on this pay scale? Would it put them at a PO 10 with 2 years of service? Because currently, if I've been here 10 years, I'm at a PO 10 rate, but my next bump is 15. So I'm a PO 10 plus a year, PO 10 plus 2 years, right? So would it put them at a PO 10 plus 2 years? Is that how you envision it?
Potentially, you could do that as far as I understand the process that we discussed, that yes, you could potentially give up to that much. Wouldn't necessarily be a regular thing by any means.
I think that would be amenable to the union. I think we could accept that.
Adam, can we put that down as a
Yeah, we can write it
win
down
for today?
Yeah. Okay. Anything else we want to talk about right now? So just to summarize, it sounds like we're going to go back and caucus and we're going to come up with a counter proposal that's going to fit within our budget parameters and using your pay structure. And you guys would like to see certification pay as one of your priorities. And we're going to have to talk about that. I'm not certain that we're willing to go down that route, but we certainly appreciate your desire there, and we can discuss it.
Yeah, I think it's just important that you understand our priority. And then, obviously,
As
you
do
guys will
we.
decide whether you want to go along that road or not. So,
I think what I'm struggling with is the certification, putting the money in the certification pay as opposed to wage increases, right? Because if someone wants to make more money through their career, the certification pay, the certification is just part of that progression. So I think I'm missing something if the choice at the end of the day is certification pay or more money in base wages. I would assume, although I'm hearing something different, that a base wage increase would be more important than a certification pay route. Also, in the goal of simplicity, the certification route is kind of a nightmare to administer. But so if you could just add some more to that, just so I get a better understanding of where you're coming from.
sure. So currently, minus this last hire group, I believe is the first group, everybody had some educational requirements to be a police officer. So when we lowered that standard, we want to ensure that, it's important for our members to have people standing next to them during crises that they can count on, that are making good decisions, people that are not going to put us on the front page of the paper, so to speak, because they make good decisions. And so we feel that currently everybody that's working there, minus the new hire group that's in probation, probably meets the educational requirements for those incentive pays. It's the people that are following on that don't have that we want to incentivize that they continue to get training, and we want to incentivize that they also continue to get education. And by doing the post certificates, it does incentivize them to do both. And the department does provide training, but really to accelerate this process, you have to seek training on your own and or pay for training potentially on your own. And so it will accelerate that process for us. And so I know that, we're talking about 1/3% versus 1/3% going into a base rate, but we want to incentivize our people to get the extra training, get the extra education. They will get that 33 cents out of every dollar that we're asking for by doing that. And if they decide not to do anything, then they're not going to get it. And I think that it is a slight cost savings. I know the administration is a headache. It's a slight cost savings because A, not everybody's eligible. B, the city gets the benefit of having potentially better officers that are better trained. And the officers get the benefit of a little bit of pay incentive.
And you all feel, thank you for that. And you all feel it's a priority that this trumps more money to everyone.
I mean, I guess if we were talking about a 1% COLA, would I rather have 1.33% COLA and not this? Then I would say no, I'd rather have 1% COLA and the 0.33 in the incentive side.
Thank you. That's helpful. So unless there are any other questions, I think we're headed back to caucus. I would say we'll try 30 minutes again. So 11:10. Thank you.
Just one quick question before we break, sorry. This is the proposed compensation package. Do we have other proposals out there that we're going to tackle as far as civil service or anything else?
I mean, we still have to cross the civil service bridge and we still have to cross the language cleanup.
Right.
And then there's a few things that were verbally agreed upon that we got to get in writing and TA'd.
Okay.
But I mean,
Adam, should we just focus on this and then come back for that? Okay. Thank you.
Will you have a civil service proposal?
We do.
Okay, great.
I mean, and if it would be helpful, we can drop it in there now so you can review it. I don't know if you want it now or if you want it later.
I say go for it.
Okay.
So I'll adjourn the meeting. We will not be caucusing and we will entertain a proposal from the union on the civil service MOU.
Sorry if I do.
Steve, can you hear me? I can't see you guys or hear you guys. I'm just wondering if the broadcast was cut.
Meanwhile, I'm not seeing a folder. Is it coming or? Oh. Gotcha.
All right, I can see and hear you now.
Check testing. You're good?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So AJ, do you want to repeat that question real quick?
Yes, I can repeat that. So my question was basically, has there ever been an instance where we've specifically gone after someone for a specialty skill, officer wise, not command staff, for a specific skill that, you know, we would need to do this for and give that extra 5 years?
Sure. The only thing that I can think of, and I'm not sure of any details because I wasn't involved in that decision-making process, but when we were going through the issues related to protests in the summer of 2020 and thereafter, I think there was talk about trying to attract a skill set of folks who had experience dealing with intelligence gathering, so criminal intelligence unit type of background, as well as folks who may have more experience in dealing with crowd management and those types of skills. I don't know if we ever acted on that, but I could see that as a potential if we want to attract a certain skill set, maybe somebody who has experience dealing with human trafficking or whatever those things might come up in the future. I don't know that we can foretell what they might be, but in the past, I believe we did have some discussion about targeting people with intelligence related capabilities and crowd management related capabilities.
Well, we
That makes
never
sense.
exercised that.
That's why I say I don't know if the prior chief exercised that or if that factored into his discretionary offer of different pay scales for folks coming in.
Okay. Because I guess my when I look at that is if we're offering that halftime up to 14 years would bring somebody in at 7
Right.
max. And then if we do that additional 5 at the chief's discretion, it seems to me like we're going back to what we're at, where if we leave that discretion, now we could have someone where this officer was brought in at 12, and then that same officer with the same amount of time was brought in at 3. I mean, that won't happen because they will be brought in at 7 at the very least.
Right.
But now we're just bringing this other one in at 5 because they have a specific skill set.
Yes, I think that is the idea. There would be a floor that nobody would go below.
Okay. Thank you.
So I dropped in the revised civil service rules. I just want to speak to it briefly and I'll let you guys look at it. We tried to clean it up. We separated the sergeant lieutenants sections. I know that the city had some concerns related to lieutenant testing. I think all we asked for in this was that sergeants, the opportunity to test for lieutenant goes to sergeants first. And should nobody pass or they decline, then the chief has a discretion to open it up to outside and or experienced officers. We moved away from any of the testing portions of the lieutenant's test and ultimately just tried to clean it up and remove stuff that is already in policy, but refines and redefines the rules from the previous MOU. So really our position, like I said, is we feel the department should allow sergeants to test before going outside. If no sergeants are successful at that, then the union does not concern whether you go outside or experienced. And we removed any controls related to the testing process. We think the testing of management should be determined by the chief, and we really have no say in it other than it needs to be posted, it needs to be declared, and there needs to be a review process. But as far as because the sergeant and lieutenant testing were kind of commingled in the durations and that whole process. So we're stepping back from that and giving more managerial latitude related to that. We still do think that the members that test for sergeant or test for lieutenant are sergeants, and those are our members, and we still want to protect some of that, but really all we're asking for is a protection of that they'd be given the opportunity to test or meet those qualifications and going forward. So I'll let you guys, when you go to caucus, take a review of this, and then when we come back, we can delve into it.
Just a quick question. Did you make any changes to the sergeant testing process, or does this reflect the language that's in place today?
No, we did make some testing. My understanding is the department wants to go to an annual test. We're open to whatever duration the city or the department really wants to. If it's a year, that's great. If it's 2 years, great. If it's 3, whatever. And then basically cleaning it up. We're asking for a 360-degree evaluation, which we've started doing more instead of a survey monkey. And so it's pretty vague, just a written exam, a practical exam, and a 360. I think we would have to define what a 360 is. Outside of that, there's really not any changes to the sergeant's test. It's just a cleaner look and a more cleaned up version.
And as I'm glancing through, just to clarify, do you address the 1, 2, 3 year list in there, or is it just taken out?
We basically just said that we left in that the chief has a discretion to take from the top 3. The list is basically the duration of whatever is determined.
Okay.
And, that's really the only changes, because currently it said, the list is for so long, but basically if we're going to test for a year, then the list should be for that year.
Sure.
And so that's kind of where our head's at. Or if you want to test every 2 years, that's fine with us. If you want to test 18 months, we don't have a dog in that fight, but the list would last for however long the test lasts. And that rest of that process would be the same.
Okay. And I noticed on the lieutenant portion, you've increased the open to Boise police officers with 10 years consecutive experience as opposed to the 6 years currently in place.
Yeah, we felt like we need a little more time on that, or give the chief the discretion to immediately go outside. So if he opens it up to senior officers, then he can also just collect for somebody from the outside if that's what's necessary, if we don't have people.
But I can't promote somebody with 8 years experience with previous supervisory experience.
That's-
They wouldn't be open.
That we don't have it written that way. If that's a concern you have, we could definitely probably move on that piece.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Any other proposals for now? Chief, you sure? All right. I propose we break until 11:30, if that works for everybody. All right, thank you. All right. With that, we'll conclude our bargaining, and I think, Adam, you're going to kick us off.
Yeah. So we're going to get back to you on Thursday with a wage proposal, with an economic proposal. But we spent a lot of time during this caucus talking about the civil service proposal you gave us, and we have a response to that and kind of want to talk through that. And so if Biff received what I sent him, and if it's in the folder, then we can pull that up.
Yeah, it should be in the folder now.
I see it. And so I just tried to do a track changes on either things we're proposing to change or items that we want to discuss. So I think we're okay with this first part. If you go down to C1, the sergeant testing process, we're proposing sergeant testing shall occur on an as-needed basis as determined by the chief of police. And then the last sentence, officers with 5 years of consecutive service at Boise Police Department are eligible to be promoted. That would allow them to test before they hit 5 years, but they wouldn't be promoted until they've.
And just for a little more background on that, if somebody's, their 5-year anniversary is January 7th, but the test is on January 5th, we could allow them to test even though they haven't been there 5 years, as long as they've been there at least 5 before they're promoted, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that. So what you're saying is if January is my anniversary date and the test is, say my
December.
anniversary date's January 1st, the test is January 30th. I'm a 4-year officer.
December 30th is what I'm looking at. Okay.
Okay. But if I'm 11 months away from being 5, I could still test. I guess I'm just trying to clarify how that would look logistically because the test is eligible for a year. So if I tested at 4 months and 11 years, I could still test, and then you could only promote me at the 5th year.
Correct. As long as you've been an officer for 5 years, then you're eligible to be promoted. You can't be promoted unless you've been there at least 5 years. We're just trying to eliminate the
Okay.
guy who gets eliminated because of a few days, weeks, or months. So
Sure.
eligibility.
Understandable. Okay.
Then scrolling down to D, from our perspective on that, rather than try to set forth what the examination process is going to be, we've got the language in C saying there's going to be a committee to determine the matter and content of the test. And you had proposed, I think the current language says there's one union member, at least one on the committee, and you had changed it to 2. And we're okay with at least 2 being on the committee, but we would suggest that it be left up to the committee to determine what the test looks like. So rather than try to spell all that out, we would leave it to the committee. So that's why we're striking through the language there in D.
Okay.
I have a question. What's the problem with not having it in there? I mean, is there some changes to the testing process that the city wants? I guess my question is, why is it a bad thing to outline how the testing process shall occur to both parties and be held to it.
So I just think the committee who comes up with the test, and that's represented from all, all parts of the department, they should have the ability to decide how the test should be administered and scored, and that committee should come up with that information. And certainly there's nothing wrong with having guidelines, but we don't have spelled out what a 360 evaluation is. We don't have spelled out when that occurs. Currently, we have the written and the oral, or the written and the assessment, and then the ranking happens, and then the survey monkey, if you will, in the past has been used later after there's an opening. I just think changes can occur, things can happen, needs can arise, that we should be flexible and agile enough to be able to respond to and have a committee determine that, rather than just be, it shall consist of 3 segments, this, and this.
I think our biggest concern is how that will be scored and the weighting of that scoring, and how that would look. So I'll kind of pause to see what your thoughts are on that.
Okay.
So currently, the practical examination, for lack of a better terms, is the highest weighted percentage for success on that test. And the, Survey Monkey currently holds less value. And so, in changing these, we're open, but I have to also be able to articulate to the body why we are precluding that from future status, I guess. And I mean, you have to understand that we come from a place of distrust, and this isn't personal distrust against you. I think you're a very trustworthy person. However, we're still dealing with that, and we're happy to have you, but you're going to be gone, and we don't know who's coming next. So they're in here for a reason, because of past abuses, and so we're open to change, but we really have to kind of understand it, I guess, is my point.
The only thing I'd add to that in the city's mind, if you're going to increase the union representation on the panel, then you have the ability to get to a better place as a panel in terms of what's weighed and what the testing process looks like, as opposed to being super prescriptive and still having 2 union members on the panel.
And I appreciate that, Chief Washburn. At the same time, that committee makes recommendations, and ultimately it's the chief that decides whether they'll follow those recommendations or not. And so the level of protection, even though it's 2, which, honestly, we just think that gives a more well-rounded committee to have 2 on there instead of 1. And I know it's an immense amount of work to put these tests on and to prepare that. And so, that was kind of our thought process behind there. But I can understand how that gives us a little more control, but that's just a control and a recommendation that does not have to be followed. And there's no guarantees for us on that.
I'd like to ask Chief Weiniger, because he's been at the department the longest with everybody sitting at the table. Has the way it's currently written, with the examination, with the written examination, 70%, basically everything that's lined out in red, has there been a problem with that in the past, how that has worked since you've been here?
No, I don't think there's been a problem. I think we're just looking to simplify the language. And
do you believe the process in there as it is now to be a fair process?
certainly, I think it's fair. I think there could be arguments made that the percentages might need to be adjusted up or down one way or the other. And that depending on the process that is decided upon, you may want to give more weight to a particular exercise than is spelled out.
Well, and if we want to have consistency though, correct?
Sure.
Okay, so if we want to have consistency based on the committee, then if we want to make changes, how we outline these, and we want to change weights, then let's sit down and talk about numbers on changing weights.
And have to bargain that in collective bargaining every 2 years or 4 years or.
What I'm saying is that if you want to change how things are weighted now, but it should be spelled out. If this is a fair process and we're just talking about changing how some things are weighted, do we need to change how things are weighted every time in a promotional exam?
My issue is the things aren't defined. So 360-degree evaluation process, I don't know what that means. So I'm not sure unless we establish what that means. I'm not sure how we know how it's supposed to weigh into the process. The city would prefer this language to be stricken, which is why we struck it. And you're welcome to bring a counter proposal.
Well, basically,
So, yeah, we understand that 360. And when I dropped this in here, which I think we did a little prematurely just to try to get some work done in the breakout sessions, we would have to define that, and we would be open to a discussion on defining what that looks like and having input. So we understand that there's some vagaries in here that would require some follow-on language to define certain things. And I think that's just part of that negotiation process.
But you would prefer to have that be a contract negotiation as opposed to a committee decision when it's time to have a promotional process?
Well, I think our position is that if we had some documented structure that did give latitude for the committee, but was still structured, and we understand essentially it's going to be this thing, and we understand what it looks like on the outside, that the components of it could be determined by the committee. And so really our goal is to create a structure that everybody agrees is fair, and then let the committee and the department decide how that test really plays out. So that's really kind of what we're hoping for going forward.
Okay.
Sorry, Adam, go ahead.
All right, I will continue. So in F, again, this just goes along with our proposal that the committee would decide. We just changed it to say the examination process may include oral interviews, practical exercises, or other tasks as the committee deems necessary. We took out the part about the 360-degree evaluation process, not because we're opposed to it, but again, because the committee would be deciding it. And the same with what each portion of the test is worth, how it should be weighted. That's why we struck through those portions of it. And in H, we're simply saying the ranking shall be established on an eligibility list based on the highest score. And again, the committee would be determining the weighting and several in what the actual segments of the test would include. In K, I just reworded this, and I was looking at the language of the existing MOU, and you had taken out a couple of things. One was a candidate's name. The current language says a candidate's name may be removed from the eligibility list if they are under a work agreement due to performance issues. You had taken that out, and we weren't sure why you had taken it out. We stuck it back in. I think you had also taken out language about someone who's on an extended illness or injury leave of absence, and we would be okay with removing that and just determining.
So I think to give you some historical thoughts on the under work agreement, we currently require a supervisor's evaluation to test. I think we're not opposed to people under work agreement. It seems logical to me that if I was a supervisor and my subordinate was under a work agreement, that I would not approve them for testing for sergeant until those issues are worked out. So we're not opposed to leaving it in there. I just feel like it's a redundant process. And if the supervisor is doing his job as a supervisor, he should not approve a subordinate who's under a work agreement due to performance from testing. So we're not opposed to to that change. But that was kind of our thought process in removing it.
And I'm not sure on this, but just a clarification question. I don't know if somebody testing for sergeant requires a supervisor evaluation to test. Does that make sense?
And maybe they don't. I think they should.
But practically speaking, you're okay with leaving that in?
Yeah, we're conceptually, that's not an issue for us, but that's where
Okay,
our thought process was.
makes sense. Adam?
Okay. So moving on, moving down to the lieutenant promotional process, this is an area where we feel it really is a management right. And so we would simply propose to have language saying sergeants are eligible to compete for promotions to lieutenant and will be evaluated in the same manner as external candidates.
So the language related to posting and a process is, why is the city opposed to that?
I don't know that we're opposed to posting the process. We were just trying to get through this today, and it was simpler to strike through it. But I think we're fine with posting the process and making everyone aware of the process.
Yeah, we just felt like that's a lieutenant's process. Certainly sergeants are affected by that, meaning that they're eligible to compete in our viewpoint. And obviously we would have to make that process known to them and post it and let them be aware of it and all of those things. But we just felt like the lieutenant promotional process really isn't part of the union's responsibility to negotiate over the terms of that process.
Yeah, and that's been a reoccurring theme that the city says is management rights. But the city gave those management rights up. And so the current system is the system we're involved with, which includes lieutenants testing process, which does affect our sergeants as members. And we're trying to respect the management right side of that as best we can, with still providing protection for our sergeants testing for lieutenant. And then once that process is underway, or they get promoted, they're somebody else's to protect. So given the way it's written, am I misunderstanding that basically if you open a lieutenant's position, you could determine whether sergeants are eligible, but you may also go outside?
Correct. But if we did go outside, sergeants would be evaluated in the same manner as any external candidates.
Okay. So right,
A fair process across the board before any selection is made.
fair depending on who's applying it. So currently, sergeants, the way it's written, the MOU is written now, is the department has to test with sergeants first before going external. So that would be removed under this language.
Correct.
Okay.
As well as the language would be removed in the current one referring to you have to be a sergeant for 4 years and you're proposing 5, and the way it's currently written, internal officers have to be there for 6 years consecutively. You're proposing 10. Those basically all of that would go away and just say sergeants are eligible to be evaluated for promotion, and they'll be evaluated in the same manner as external candidates, just simplifying the whole.
Okay, thank you. Adam?
All right, continue. Sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you guys.
Yes.
Yes, please continue.
Okay. So under the voluntary transfer, I changed this language under A to simply say the testing and selection process will be determined by the chief of police or his or her designee. And then the second sentence, candidates will be able to review and receive feedback on their scores and performance from this process.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue, those changes.
And then skipping down, discipline. So there's a bunch of current language on discipline in the MOU, and you had just kind of pared it down to this one paragraph, and we weren't sure why all of the other existing discipline language was removed, what your intent was, or if you were.
So with the new discipline matrix, we feel like this is kind of an overlap. And so we basically said, alleged misconduct, being disciplined twice. All we really said was that discipline is really in the discipline matrix and in the policy side. All we really think that should be in the CLA is that you can't be disciplined twice for the same bad misconduct. And so, we currently already have a MOU related to a discipline matrix and changes to that discipline process. And it seemed like the version of the CLA MOU for civil service kind of duplicated that. And
Okay.
We feel like really our only protection that we demand is that you can't be in the contract, that you can't be double jeopardied for the same conduct. And we think that all the discipline really is in the policy. And I think that's currently where it is, although that overlaps with the current MOU.
Okay.
And to
Okay, that
just
makes sense.
clarify one more thing,
Oh,
Adam,
go
if I
ahead.
could, letter C in the original MOU talks about no member of the police department shall participate in any labor strike against the city of Boise or in any manner fail to observe and obey the lawful orders of any of his or her superior officers. Such misconduct shall, upon sufficient proof, be grounds for discipline up to and including dismissal, discharge, or termination from employment with the city of Boise. You intentionally removed that as well, and everything you're saying is just handled in the discipline matrix.
So the inability to strike and all that is handled in the opening paragraphs of the actual CLA.
So we can just eliminate all of that.
I think that
language.
it only needs to be in one place. I mean, if you really want to restate it in here, we could probably do that. I was just trying to clean it up.
I like to clean it up as much as we can. So
We don't plan on going on strike. I think it'd be illegal.
Okay. I think the city had a hard stop at 1 today, and we're at 1 o'clock. I don't know if there's anything else that we want to talk about right now.
So essentially, just to clarify, the city is going to return on Thursday with new financial numbers and a proposal.
yes.
Yeah, we'll
And then
have a new economic.
We'll have time to go through this and see where we're agreeable and where we're not, and come back.
Good.
That sounds good. Thank you. With that, we are adjourned.